This is Cynthia. I'm interviewing Eleanor on May 1st, 2023. Hi, Eleanor.
Hi, Cynthia. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. We have a lot of questions for you, Eleanor, because you're a very long-term member of our church. People are very interested in the things that you have to share with us. Can you talk with us first about how long you've been a member here, how long you've attended at the church, and some of your earliest memories of First Congregational?
Well, I was born in 1932 here and baptized here in this church. So my mom and dad were members. They came out from Iowa to Colorado Springs in 1926 and became members of the church. And then I came along in 1932. So I was a member until after I was married, and we had kids, and then my husband's job took us away. So then I was gone from the church for a number of years, quite a long time. And then after my husband died, I decided most of all the places that I'd lived, I preferred Colorado Springs. So I moved home, which I'd considered home all my life, and partly because of the mountains, partly because of the weather, and greatly because of the Congregational church. It was just a place. I went to church everywhere I went. We moved a lot of places, but I always went to the church. And I belonged to one in Oak Park that was very formal, Oak Park, Illinois, and the ushers wore tuxedos and the choir wore hats, big hats, like a graduation cap. It was quite an interesting experience. So we lived all the way from Hawaii to Florida, and I was in the West Palm Beach Church before I came back here. That was about 10 or 11 years ago that I came back. So I was a gap in my membership, but I loved the church. I loved Colorado. I loved the people. So that's why I'm back as a member of this church.
Mm-hmm.
I think I try to remember Reverend Manthei was the minister when I was a kid, but there was somebody before him, and I can't think, his picture's upstairs. But I was old enough to babysit with the minister's kids, which I did regularly. So Reverend Manthei was part of my life. And I then graduated from college and got a job in Illinois, and he was by then the minister at the Congregational church in the town nearby, interestingly enough. So I kind of followed him along. I became a member when you could become a member when you were 12, if I'm recalling right. And we had to go to a class and learn it, and we had to learn a lot of Bible verses. I remember that. Mrs. Knapp taught the classes that we had to learn the Bible every Saturday morning for a number of weeks. I rode the bus every Saturday morning, and I remember hearing about the prisoners of war in Vietnam saying they spent time remembering the verses of the Bible they had memorized when they were kids. Mm-hmm. And I could see how that would really be true, because if I really just think about it, some of those old prayers that are in the Bible, you can kind of come up with what you had to memorize that day and say over and over until you knew them all. Then you could become a member. There was a ribbon with little squares on it, and every square had a Bible verse that you had to know before you could be a member. That was when I was 12.
Mm-hmm. And you told me that you and your husband got married in the church.
Yes, we did. We got married in 1956 in this church. He had grown up in the Methodist church. My mom sang here on Sunday mornings, and she sang at the Methodist church at night. And so I got acquainted with, I went to school with Dave as well, but I got acquainted with their youth group too. So I sort of went back and forth, but we always, I don't know if we're going to ask about the youth group later on, but we had a youth group on Sunday nights. We met late in the afternoon, and then we would walk home, or I would walk over to the Methodist church and then go home with my mom. So we weren't very big, but we had an awfully good time. We had a nice bunch of teenagers that Young Life was born at that time, and it was extremely well attended by the big time churches, and I didn't go along with some of it, so I wasn't active in Young Life. But we had a nice little group of friends in our youth group that we all stuck together, and we had a wonderful time. So
great. And you also shared with me that you've had other family members that have been married at our church.
Yes, my brother's daughter was married here in the church. His son was not married in the church because the scaffolding was all up for whatever you did to the church while I wasn't here. But they didn't have the wedding here, but they did have Christy's wedding here. And it was a beautiful wedding, and they wanted candlelight. I don't know if you all noticed that there are candelabras around the top of the church. I mean, up above the doors. And there were not candles then. So my brother got it fixed up, and they had candles for Christy's wedding. But then after that, they thought that it was so nice that then they made it electrified. So when you turn it on, it looks like we have candles. And it really is nice. It was a very good thing that happened that day.
Are there other special celebrations that you remember attending at the church that really stand out in your mind?
Yeah, the mystery. From the time you can think as a little bitty guy in this church, the mystery is a big deal. Because when you're little and you sit down there in front, and my mom was one of the angels, and boy, when she came down that aisle singing, they didn't come in quite like they do today, but she'd come right by and I'd singing that song and standing up there with the angels. That was really big. I think every kid probably remembers that. I do agree. Yep. Then you get to be a teenager girl, and you can be an angel. And back then, I don't know how they are now, but you had a big metal thing that clamped on your head. So you had that halo. We all looked like angels, but I don't think we had them fooled quite well. But it was something that was a big deal every year. In fact, I flew back here when they celebrated the 100th, just so I could be here, because I thought it was really amazing.
Is there another celebration that stands out in your mind?
Well, we had really nice potluck dinners. I remember that. We did that often. I was telling Rachel that the kitchen was downstairs, and so we had a dumb waiter. They called it a dumb waiter. It was a little mechanical thing that went upstairs, and we fixed communion in the kitchen downstairs. Then we'd put it on the dumb waiter and chain it up there, and then take it into the church. It was save all the steps, going up and down the steps.
Do you remember what brought your parents to this church?
Well, they came here, and I'm sure that they had friends that were they were in the school system, and I'm sure that they had friends that I don't know where their friends were. The Wassons and the West Bays. There are names around town that are familiar. But I don't know how they hooked up to it, other than I'm sure in Iowa they must have been Congregationalists. And so they came here, and they joined right away. I noticed, I looked up, and they were early members, about 1926, 27. And that's who brought me to the church, because I was born here.
Yeah.
As was my brother. And then along came my uncle, who lived with us, and my aunt and uncle, and they lived with us, and they had kids too. They had 4 kids, so we all belonged to this church. So all of us came on Sunday mornings to church. I mean, it was just what you did.
Well, you mentioned the youth group. Can you tell us about that and any other special activities that you remember participating in?
Yeah, I was a deaconess. We had deaconesses and deacons. And you had assigned jobs when you were a deaconess to do the communion, wash the little glasses and put them away every time we had it. We passed it from person to person in a big silver tray. And so we'd fix that and cut up the bread, get it all ready once a month, just like that. I was in that group. I was a deaconess for quite a while. I wasn't on the council. But then after I got back, then I took over the Chancel Stewards, and so I was running those until I fell down and killed myself on the side. And Jill is doing it now and doing a beautiful job of it. It's a wonderful thing to do. You can be sure every Sunday the chancel looks lovely.
Mm-hmm. How long did you do that for, Eleanor?
I did that 2 or 3 years with Connie. Well, I went to a PEO meeting when I first got back here, and some lady asked me, did I go to church? And I said yes. She said, what church? And I said, First Congregational. And Connie Robb was standing right there, and she whirled around and she said, that's my church. And we were instant friends. I didn't know Connie before that, so it was like finding a jewel. She just pulled me right in, so I got active right away.
Who were some of your other friends at the church that are kind of special friends?
You know, well here, Nance isn't very active, but she used to do the big cupboard that's in the hall there, and they put different things in that. And she did that. I helped on that for a little while. My sister-in-law helps with that still. And I don't know all who my friends are. I volunteer in a different organization. So June Hollenbeck, June, and several other people I crossed paths. The organization that I volunteer in town is one of the ones that our MG&O gives money to. And so I'm really thrilled about that. I always try to tell the church how much it means to be the receivers of the missionary money. It's something that's so worthwhile.
Connie told me this story about how many years ago you and I think it was Ruth Lemcole were at some kind of conference, not here.
No, that was my senior year in high school, and that was the year that they voted. The youth from all over the country met in Ohio, and we voted to merge the two big churches. The old people hadn't voted yet, but the youth, we thought we were so smart. And I didn't know Ruth Lemcole. She wasn't here. She lived in a different state. But one day when we were having a meeting here, shortly after I got back, I was talking about being in that group. We got a very calm lady from Greeley agreed to drive 4 of us to Ohio to that big conference. They still have it. It was wonderful. But one funny thing was I'd always lived here, so I'd never been near water. And as we drove to Ohio, we kept crossing these rivers, and I'd never seen anything like it. So she would stop and let me take a picture because I was so excited. But the hitch was when I got home, I didn't know which river was which river. I just had a lot of pictures of rivers. But we did have a good time. We had such a fun teasing the kids that came from the East Coast that would believe anything you told them. That the mountain goats had 2 short legs and 2 long legs, so they could walk around the mountain. Oh, they would fall for anything we told them. They just thought we lived in the Wild West. But we did have a good time, and the reason that Ruth remembers, as do I, is that once that boat was taken, we universally stood up and sang, God of grace, God of glory, this wonderful group of kids from all over this country. It was huge. Then I was still here when our church finally voted to, every church had to vote. So then this church voted, and it was a big deal. We all stood up and sang, and it was a big, to merge churches like that is a big deal. So I was president of the Colorado State Youth Group. We used to meet at La Forêt, have a summer camp at La Forêt. And I was, my senior year in high school, I was president of the State Pilgrim Fellowship, it was called then. That was our youth group. So I did that. Then pretty soon I had kids and left. I got married and left. Well, when I graduated from college, I became a speech therapist in Illinois. That's where I went to church in Oak Park. But then after a couple of years, I came home and got married, so I was back in the church again. I never left as a member then, but then we kept moving. We kept getting to be members of another church and another church. We built a church in West Palm Beach. We built a church in California. We were in on a lot of things. The church in Hawaii was interesting. It was over the mountains, so I didn't get to go every Sunday because it was kind of a long drive. So I would go to the Lutheran church just because it was down the street. And that I found that they were not too different than we were, except they stood up when I usually sit down, and we sat down when they usually stood up. But that church in Hawaii is still a very big, active church. Very interesting. Yep.
Well, can you share with us what you value most about this church and this church community here in Colorado Springs?
What I've done?
What you value the most?
Oh, first of all, I value the people, but I also value very much the philosophy. That's very important to me, that everybody is welcome. It's just so important. And over the years, you see such prejudice where all the places we lived, it was difficult to not stick up for what you wanted to without offending someone, because people are so radical in their beliefs, and I think they need to think harder about accepting everybody. And so consequently, I knew what was here, and I was very glad to be back here. The one in West Palm Beach was very forward-looking. It's very active. So that suited me just fine. I got into that because I took a little job at an accounting office, and the minister, two of the ladies went to the Congregational church, and the minister during Lent would have communion at the church at lunchtime. And so anybody could come for a communion that wanted to every week on Wednesday. And so they kept going, and so they said, "You want to come?" And I said, "Well, sure." So I went, and I thought, well, I found a home. And so I joined, and the minister and his wife were our very close friends. So I've been really a Congregationalist all my life.
Well, what advice, Eleanor, would you have for this congregation as we go forward into the next 150 years?
Yeah, I want them to keep on being as they are, to make more people welcome, to grow because they are that way, not because this is the place to go in the city. It's because it's the place where we believe what we preach, that we really live what we say we will. I think that's so important. And I like that very much about this church. And they stick to it. We do.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great thing about the church.
And I think people are finding us. It just takes a little while when people come to find us. But they will when they're looking. It's wonderful. Nobody is here. One of the questions are coming in. I don't think there's anybody here that was here when I was younger. Marty Booth, I swear she must have been here when my mom was singing. However, she was just enough older than my mom that she didn't know my folks. But and I don't. There was one person here when I got back, but she died. So I think that my brother's the oldest. My brother's the most longtime member of the church. So I guess he's probably close to the one that's been here the longest of everybody.
And tell us your brother's name again.
My brother is Bob Howard. His wife is Gretchen. They are members. They always come and get a rose when they have that. Who's been the member?
Yeah.
He doesn't come all the time, but he comes every now and then. He'll be sitting there with me. And he has his daughter Christy and his wife Gretchen.
Can you think of anything else that you want to share during this interview?
Well, I was telling Connie about what somebody probably doesn't know, but there was no atrium. There was open space where the atrium is, and where the office was a house, a little house. And that's where we held youth group, and that's where we learned the Bible verses, and we had Sunday school. And it used to be a really big deal, because if we really were good kids, then they would let us play the player piano. And I don't know if you know how that works, but it sure is fun. The rollers go around and around, and the keys play the tune, and the music comes out. And we just thought that was really it. That was we spent a lot of time in that house, and it was while I was not here that they enclosed and put the atrium in and built the office building. So that was new to me when I came back.
And you were also sharing with me that when you were first here, that there was a house that the minister and his family lived in.
Yeah, the minister, we owned a house, the Manse it was called, and the minister would live in it. But my husband was a trustee, and at that time they decided to sell the house and give the minister more money, and they would own their own house. And that was a very good decision.
Where was that house located?
The one where I babysat him was there. He lived first on Nevada and then on Tejon, north of the college. Then I lived there too, and lived on San Miguel. And so there was so little crime in this town that at 11 at night when they'd get home, I would just walk right down the street home, not afraid at all. But it wasn't very big. The city wasn't very big at that time. It was only about 30,000 when we left, when my daughter was 4. Yeah. So it grew while I was gone. I couldn't believe it when I got back here. And all the way to Lyman, it looks like Colorado Springs is now. It'll be all the way to Denver pretty soon. It's growing. People found it because it's still the best place in the whole country to live.
Are there other things you want to share, Eleanor?
Well, I'm having to give up and go to live with my daughter. I have to. After I fell, I realized I'm now 91, and I need more care than I thought I did when I was so active and busy, and then I fell. They came, each took a turn and came and stayed with me, but we made this plan that when I got old, I never thought I was going to get old. You know, I didn't plan on being old. And I got there before I meant to. But we're building a casita in my daughter's backyard in Sun City West. And next month I will be moving to Arizona. And I'm very sad to leave the church. But I looked, and there's 2 or 3 Congregational churches not far from my house there. So I'll be hunting for one.
So that will be another Congregational church.
That's correct, yeah. I'm sticking with the Congregational church.
Well, I know everybody's really going to miss you here.
Well, I will too. I love this, not only the people, I love the building. There's a spiritual feel to the building, and everybody that I bring here feels the same way. When you walk in to that sanctuary, there's just something lovely about it. There's a spirit there. I so admire those people that built this building so long ago. Their eye to the future, that it would be still here. We're the longest time church meeting in the same building in this town. So the others built more building, but we just stuck in the same ones. So, and I love it. I love the building. I love the people, and I'm very sorry to miss, but I will be back to visit because my brother still lives here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although he's getting old too.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's nice that you're doing this so that some of the people, it's nice to be able to tell people how you feel about the church, because I love this church.
It is. I think it's a great project for the church to do, because people are going to be so interested in some of the things you shared with us. There's some of us that are new members that don't know all these things.
No, you can't know. Yeah, like when I'm new somewhere else, you learn it by people telling you about it. So
right.
Yeah. One time it was interesting to me. I looked in that little box at the back of the church where it's memories or history of some kind, and I lifted the lid, and you had an interim right then. You had an interim minister, and they had put his name in there. He had also been the interim minister at my church in Florida, and I was so surprised when I read his name. And he owned a big mobile home, which he toted, from Colorado to West Palm Beach, and lived in that while he was filling in at our church while we looked for a minister down there.
Oh gosh.
So it's a small world.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Eleanor, I think we're pretty close to wrapping up, but
Thank
I want to
you.
make sure that if there's anything else that you want to say, that you're given the opportunity.
Well, it's just been fine. I'm so glad to share some of the happy times I remember, because I've had nice times in this church.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question. When you were young, was the pulpit in the center of the...
Yes. And the two chairs, the pulpit was in the middle, and then those two big royal chairs were, and then, oh, I meant to tell that actually, because I was in the choir. And we had a choir loft. And where that wood comes from, David, that's okay. David sits behind, the organ is there. Well, the organ was turned around. That's why there's a hole in there, because the organ went the other way, and the organist looked in the mirror at the congregation. And then the choir sat up there, and we sang every Sunday. And those it went all the way. They said they kept those. We still have those pieces that they took away that made the choir loft. You stepped up into the choir loft, yeah. But it was movable. They could move the pulpit. They didn't very often. It was not on the side.
Where did you get into the choir loft?
You went from those, I call it the groom's room. It's where the groom usually waits in a wedding, and the sacristy. You could come in there either way. I don't remember marching. I think we were just up there when church began. We would rehearse before church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I was shocked when it was gone. That happened while I didn't live here. I can't think of anything else. I'll think of something when I get home, probably. But thank you. Thanks for doing this, guys.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate it. And you too, Cynthia.
Thanks, Eleanor.
Glad to know you a little more.
Yeah.
I am in the widows group. That's a nice little group. The other one got so big, and so we started a new one. There's 6 of us.
I know, I heard that.
And Ruth is in that. She's in that too.
Yeah.
So it's been nice. She and I are the same age.
Yeah,
So.
I'm glad you've been doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're newer widows. Dave's been gone for 11 years, but
Yeah.
I'm still, I can help,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I receive from them as well. It's a nice group.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So, yep. Okay, are we done?
We're done.
Okay.